Tonight's episode brought to you by Leap Spirits. Not only does August, and folks, August is going fast, but not only does August bring the start of football season, but for fans of Leap Spirits and the Green Bay Packers, this month there's a special reason to celebrate as Packers legend and Leap Spirits co-founder Leroy Butler is being and was enshrined into the NFL Hall of Fame.
To commemorate the special occasion and gear up for football season, Leaf Spirits created a Hall of Fame limited edition bottle featuring Leroy. This special edition bottle comes with the same great recipe distilled from Midwest corn, incorporating a proprietary coconut filtering process that provides a vibrant fragrance and flavor. Not only is it a must-have in any Packers fans' home bars as we gear up for football season, Dane, when it's gone, this bottle will make the perfect addition to your memorabilia collection.
Wags, football season is here, my friend, and Leap Vodka has been recognized for excellence by industry experts from coast to coast and was recently awarded Wisconsin's Vodka of the Year. To find Leap Vodka and Leap and Lemonade in retail store or restaurant anywhere in Wisconsin, visit leapspirits.com and click to find Leap Vodka. See show notes for details.
Every year I know we gonna go hard. We been that team ever since Bart started. All my cheese heads go pack go. Ain't showing no mercy, cutting no slack, no. I ain't a bad sport and I'll even wish you good luck. Only thing I will.
Welcome to Lombardi's Legends Podcast. Dane here as always with Wags. And folks, it's a tough day. It always is. Cut day in the NFL. Packers have shrunk their roster from 80 all the way down to 53. Maybe some surprises, some not so big surprises with some of these cuts. But Wags, how are you feeling today? And let's just get right into it, man.
Yeah, man, I'm feeling all right. And, it's always cool to get to that unofficial end of the preseason. So now we're going to be gearing up for regular season football. Certainly a tough day for all the guys around the league, especially these Packer guys that we've been following closely here all offseason and here into the preseason that did not make the 53-man roster. But hopefully a good number of them will still have a job tomorrow after clearing waivers and getting some practice squad opportunities, especially with these expanded 16-man practice squads. So we'll find out. I'm sure that a number of the guys that are not on this initial 53-man roster will be still part of this team moving forward once those roster decisions get made and the waiver wire process picks up. So we'll get into some of the cuts. As you said, Dane, I think maybe a couple minor surprises, but they're nothing significantly surprising as these cuts were announced today. But before we do that, I want to kind of get into some other news and notes. So I think the big news today, Dane, not to overshadow the roster cut downs, but was Mason Crosby being activated off the physically unable to perform list. So he is on this 53-man roster, and it looks like all indications are we'll be ready for week one at Minnesota.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a big deal, Wags. I legit wasn't sure if the Packers were going to be able to have Crosby coming into week one. I thought that kid in camp, Ahmed, that had come in swinging the leg incredibly well. So wouldn't have been surprised if he ended up being the kicker for the first couple of weeks. And maybe Crosby, I kind of thought might go onto the physically unable to perform list for those first few weeks. It doesn't look like that's going to be the case. Wouldn't be surprised if the young man that was in camp heads to the practice squad, if the Packers can stash him. But big news, Mason Crosby, Iron Man, has never missed a game in his NFL career. He's trending that direction again. It looks like he's going to be kicking for the Packers come week one in Minnesota.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how Mason looks. We didn't get to see him all preseason. It's been a while. I don't know if he's ever missed the entire preseason or any preseason games for that matter, Dane. So hopefully not only is he healthy, but he's sharp. We can't afford to go into a big week one game, and they all count. But this could be a really close game. So is Mason going to be ready? Is he going to be at the top of his game right from the start in week one? He's got a new holder, he's got a new long snapper, and we're sure hoping, and it looks like this operation should be a bit smoother this season, but we haven't seen any game action to have those three work, and we're not going to get it until week one. So that's going to be a lot of eyes on, I think, Mason Crosby, but not only him, but Pat O'Donnell, Jack Coco, who, congratulations, made the 53-man roster as well. So it's going to be a little nerve-wracking, I think, every time Mason Crosby lines up, particularly week one, but if he struggles a little bit, every week thereafter. So hoping, being optimistic that Mason's back to what he was 2 years ago, and that everything goes smoothly, and that we don't have to be, sweating things out every week because things get off to a rocky start.
Wags, I mean, how wild is that to you? I mean, it's kind of wild to me that Mason hasn't, they haven't been working on this operation. At least we haven't seen it in with the live, right? With Jack at long snapper and Pat as the punter / holder and Mason Crosby all at the same time. So to think that, and mind you, folks, it's not like these guys have done this ever before. Pat O'Donnell, new to the team. Jack Coco, new to the team. So it truly is. Mason's the constant, but he hasn't been there all preseason. So it's not like, okay, they haven't taken reps yet this year, or, there's one new variable, but there's three new variables really trying to work together. And it's such a timing influenced job of the long snapper to the holder to the kicker. Remains to be seen. They're all professionals out there, but my goodness, what a time, Wags, for these guys to all get back after it. It's going to be pretty remarkable that week one is the first time that all three of them are going in live game action together.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure, and again, we're hope for the best. Folks, we see some comments coming in on our Facebook chat, or if you're on Facebook, YouTube with us live here tonight, or on Twitter, feel free to pop any comments or questions, surprises that you had for who made the 53-man roster. We're definitely going to highlight a few of those comments that are in there a little bit later in the episode. But Dane, before we move into some of the roster decisions, a couple other things that I wanted to hit on, and just looking at the shape of this team. Again, I said at the top, unofficial end to the preseason, or I guess official, however you want to look at it here today. And everything moving forward is preparation now for the regular season and starting week one at Minnesota. And we had some news Sunday that Elton Jenkins all of a sudden was not practicing. Seemed like a one-day thing. Not really sure what that was about. Was not an injury. Apparently not a contract extension. At least that hasn't been announced yet. So we're not exactly sure what that was, because they don't have to disclose injuries until the official week one injury report is due. So all Coach LaFleur said is it's an internal matter. Elton was on the rehab group on the exercise bike all practice and was back out there again the next day. So not sure how to read into that, but I would say it's good news. And then certainly David Bakhtiari looks like he's ramping up as well. Dane, we're not going to know, I don't think, for probably a good week, and maybe not even next week, if either or both Elton Jenkins or David Bakhtiari are going to be ready to go week one. There's a lot of gamemanship happening already right now. So I'm not sure that we're going to know too much either way. That said, there seems to be a quiet optimism. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into this. I said in the last couple episodes and offline that I wouldn't be surprised if this goes a few weeks before Bach's back. But I'm just going to go out there right now and just say there seems to be something in the works, and I'm actually going to be a little bit more surprised if both of them aren't out there week one, despite the fact that the Packers kept 10 offensive linemen. And you can read into the tea leaves of that quite a bit to say, well, they're hedging their bet. And maybe that's true. But I'm just getting a very gut feeling that they're going to be ready to go. And so, Dane, I don't know if you have any thoughts. It seems like the health of this roster not only just as we go into a regular season in general, but just anytime over the last few seasons is better than it's been in a long, long time. And it's coming at a perfect time.
Yeah. Wags, I would agree with you. I'll tell you what. We have no reason to think necessarily that Bach is going to be back for week 1 or Elton Jenkins, but I tend to agree. And yeah, I think that in past years, the Packers have carried 9 guys kind of out of camp from the offensive line. The Packers are carrying that extra guy. I would say that's probably Rasheed Walker would be considered, in my opinion, that the tackle is probably the extra player right now there. But he was just really good. And I think he's got a bright future in the league, and they're trying to keep the best guys they can keep. That's the way I'm reading this personally.
And keep in mind that could change. Not saying Rasheed Walker specifically, but this could change tomorrow. Like it
could change tonight while we're talking.
Exactly. They may want to let the waiver wire process play out for a little bit, and then they can make another move or two. But nonetheless, that's interesting. I wasn't sure if you were getting the same feeling. And Dane, I don't usually just throw that out there because usually sometimes with injuries, I'm more on the pessimistic side, just knowing that the Packers tend to play these more on the safe side. Their medical staff, they tend to be more cautious when they're making these decisions. But I don't know what it is exactly. I just have a feeling all of a sudden in the last week or so that things tend to be tending in the more optimistic direction. So we will see if that bears out or not, I guess in the next week and a half or so.
Yeah, we'll see. But then the next question isn't just, are they healthy, but where the heck are they all playing across the offensive line? We saw them play some musical chairs all preseason long. It's a great problem to have. But that being said, where do they all play? I'm inclined to think they go Bakhtiari at one end and they go Elton Jenkins at the right tackle position, and then they fill in the inside. But you and I have talked about the possibility of Yosh Nijman maybe kicking out to right tackle, starting over there. If Bakhtiari's back at the left side, Elton Jenkins. I salivate over the idea of David Bakhtiari, Elton Jenkins, left side of an offensive line. I think it'd be remarkable.
It's an exciting prospect to think about. I don't think they're going to do that just because they're going to get their best 5 guys, and they've got a lot of versatility, as you said, to be able to figure out how to get those 5 guys out there. So the real competition is not necessarily between Yosh Nijman and Elton Jenkins, because Elton Jenkins is going to be on the field. Like we know that. So no disrespect to Yosh. The competition is between Yosh Nijman and Royce Newman and Zach Tom and John Runyon Jr. Those guys are the ones that are really, I think, battling it out to secure a spot in the starting group. And honestly, the exciting thing about this, Dane, is I don't really think there's a bad option. No. They could go in any direction. I think, generally speaking, Royce Newman was a little inconsistent as a rookie, but did he start all 17 games, 16 games last season, or all 17? I can't remember if it was all 17 or not. But I thought he really played well over the second half of the season, and he made some rookie mistakes and had some rookie inconsistencies. So I think that's fresh in some Packer fans' minds, and they're saying, well, we don't want Royce Newman to be among that starting 5. But you break it down the way that he played, and they were giving him opportunities all over the place, guard and outside at right tackle. So clearly they think he's right in the mix for sure. Even if he doesn't start out at tackle, they think he's going to be right in the mix at guard. Same thing, John Runyon Jr. He's third year now, played a heck of a lot of football out there and played some very, very high level football, I would say. So not only is it exciting to have Elton and David Bakhtiari potentially healthy and bookending the outside positions on this offensive line, I'm super excited. That didn't even talk about Tom. He might be pushing. I wouldn't be shocked. Maybe not week 1, but by week 3, week 4, would you be at all surprised if Tom just forces his way, not necessarily by underperformance by any of the guys ahead of him, but just by sheer ability and what he's showing every day, I wouldn't be shocked if Tom forces his way into that starting group as well.
He reminds me of Elton Jenkins a little
Yeah.
bit, actually. Just how he plays. He's a versatile guy. He's a physical offensive lineman. He looks like he can do it all. I know his pedigree isn't quite as high as Elton Jenkins was, but who cares, right? The dude he passes the eye test instantly. And listen, injuries happen across the offensive line too. We're probably going to be seeing all of the guys we're talking about playing at some point this season along the offensive line. That's the reality of the NFL. But the difference is with the Packers versus a lot of other teams is that, after one of your guys goes down, you're going, uh-oh, really quick. The Packers, we go, damn, all right, next man up. And that's a huge difference right now. The Packers have invested along this offensive line over the last few years, not necessarily high pedigree picks, but they have invested a number of picks every single year. And right now, I think we're going to see the fruits of their labor in investing, because they have landed a lot of mid-round guys that we think can play football. And I think Zach Tom, to your point, is the next in a long line of them that goes back to guys like Newman and certainly John Runyon Jr., who I think is a starter in this league.
Yeah. And David Henderson says in our Facebook chat, best offensive line depth in the division. I
Absolutely.
mean, I completely agree. Not that I'm paying super close attention to what the Vikings and Bears and the Lions have up front, but it is an exciting development, because I don't know that we had question mark per se in the big picture with this offensive line, but we certainly didn't know what David Bakhtiari's status was heading into camp. Certainly didn't know or expect, quite honestly, I don't think anybody expected Elton Jenkins to be activated from the physically unable to perform list before the season. I think most folks figured he might be out until week 6, 7, or 8. That wouldn't have been a complete shocker. So it's really been quite a development over the course of just this preseason, and not to mention, knock on wood, because some injuries are probably going to happen. Hopefully nothing of the major variety. We deserve a little bit of good fortune here with this offensive line group, I think, for once this season. But we've been able to stay really relatively healthy up front through the course of the preseason as well. So that definitely helps when we're talking about the depth and what we have with this group as we move into the regular season. So a lot of decisions to be made, and quite honestly, not a lot of bad things that can happen. Another comment here I see in the chat suggested maybe we should trade Royce Newman. Dane, I'll let you say what you think about that. My only hesitancy with that is, like, it's tough to take a draft pick right now and deplete some of the great depth that we have. Maybe that happens after the season. That would be something that probably wouldn't be a big surprise to me, or depending on if they work out, which I expect at some point, a long-term extension for Elton Jenkins. But that way you can go into your next draft, replenish the position after the offseason. So I don't expect necessarily that to happen. I know we traded Cole Van Lanen, but by all accounts, he would have been cut. So that was just a shrewd move by Goody. But what do you say, Dan? Would you feel comfortable with the amount of depth that we have to trade in a chip? And if we got a high enough draft pick for Royce Newman, go ahead and make that move?
Honestly, I'm never comfortable enough to trade offensive linemen. Not when you've got Aaron Rodgers and Royce is on a very low dollar contract for the next couple of years. And I think that Goody in the front office is always looking ahead. Josh Nijman's not under contract forever. How's David Bakhtiari look long-term, all these other position groups. You just don't know. So I think that they're probably going to hang on to young, inexpensive offensive linemen with a lot of starting experience as long as they can, with the exception of somebody like Van Laden. But that just shows how deep this offensive line is, Wags, where you're trading a guy who's going to get cut and you're getting draft capital back. It's pretty impressive how deep this offensive line is. But one of the most physical positions on the football roster is the offensive line. You can never have enough offensive linemen as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Dane, anything else just looking at overall with this team as we get here to the end of camp and get to the end of the preseason that you wanted to hit on before we get into this 53-man roster discussion?
I'm excited to get into this 53. For those listening on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts, we are recording this live currently on Tuesday, August 30th. So we do have a live chat going with some really good, I think, input that we'll read off here in a bit. But no, it was a really physical camp, I thought. Larry McCarron, the great Packer announcer, broke down the huddle a couple days ago, and he said it was the most physical camp he can remember the Packers having the last few years, and I don't disagree with him. This is a team with a chip on their shoulder. The defense looks stacked. That we're probably going to see, as you said, Wag, some other roster changes, but after we get back from our commercial break here, I think we'll get into at least some of the cuts and a couple of the things that maybe surprised or didn't surprise us all that much.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take a opportunity to talk about our sponsor, DraftKings. DraftKings is the official sports betting partner of the NFL. And to celebrate the return of football, DraftKings is giving new customers a can't-miss offer. Bet Dane just $5 on any football game, and you get $200 in free bets instantly.
Yeah, I mean, what a deal, man. What a deal. $200, Wags? Like, I'll take it, baby. Let's throw some cash down and let's throw some bets around. And the Packers-Vikings is just around the corner. But week one in the NFL is always so exciting. There's always so many great games that opening weekend. We just give it up to DraftKings Sportsbook. Again, use promo code TPPN and get your $200 in free bets when you put $5 down on a game. It's really, there's no risk in doing something like that. It's going to just be a lot of fun.
Yeah, so go ahead and download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use our promo code TPPN. Get $200 in free bets instantly when you place a $5 bet on any football game. That's code TPPN only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details. So, Dean, Let's dive into this 53-man roster discussion. I think we talked offline. We didn't put our name on a 53-man roster this year, so we can't claim that we went 53 for 53. But I think, honestly, as we said, maybe a couple minor surprises. We saw some in the chat. I think Tyler Goodson, Jack Heflin, to name there's others to name a couple. But you go on down the line here, and clearly Packers had a process. It's easy for us as fans when we look at 3 preseason games. That's a pretty limited amount of snaps to make an evaluation. And the reality is coaching staff and front office are looking at all of the reps that they're doing every day in practice. So with the limited information we have, I think we did pretty well. But it starts to get splitting hairs once you get, quite honestly, down to that last 4 or 5 decisions on the roster. And maybe even with a couple of these guys as getting into it, perhaps it's just a matter of Packers feel like, they showed a little bit more in preseason for other teams to pick up on. Maybe that guy is more likely to get snapped up. Let's all things being equal, let's put him on to 53. Maybe we'll be able to bring this other guy back on the practice squad. Now you've got 16 practice squad opportunities or roster spots to select from. So, Dane, where do you want to start? Just where they devoted their resources, any particular players you want to hit on?
Well, the quarterback group, no surprise with the 2 quarterbacks. I'll just dive right into the running back spot. I'm a little surprised they're carrying 2 running backs. We've heard over the years that the Packers, especially the last couple of years, they're going to be running the ball a little bit more there. And we've heard the potential of A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones on the field at the same time, which is something that I really like because they're both really talented guys. You want to get your best 11 on. Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon at the same time seems like a good option. So, the idea of not having a third back there, whether it's Patrick Taylor or Tyler Goodson, it's a little surprising to me. But, you mentioned the practice squad, the expanded practice squad. This, to me, is a prime candidate for a call-up from the practice squad going forward. And the Packers might do this pretty much every darn week, a running back might be called up into that slot. So while I'm a little surprised in the grand scheme with the new practice squad rules and how they're going to be able to kind of massage that position, it's not all that shocking, I guess.
Yeah, you just said it. I think you hit on it. And the fact that, by all accounts, Kylan Hill, who Packers were really high on before he got hurt last season as a third running back, has been looking good in the rehab group. So not sure exactly when they will be activating him from the physically unable to perform list. But, they could go 6 weeks of calling up, Patrick Taylor or Tyler Goodson. And even if one of them gets snapped up and signed by another team, either to a 53, which I think seems pretty unlikely, but even to another team practice squad, they probably figure the chances of both of them going elsewhere are pretty slim, especially considering both of them know that they are very likely to get game day opportunities if they stay in Green Bay. So I think maybe it seems a little bit of a risk, but in the grand scheme of things, I think they're looking at this as a short-term solution. And quite honestly, Kylan Hill is probably going to be ahead of both of those guys anyway, once he's healthy and ready to be activated. So that gives them a little bit of additional roster flexibility at some of these other positions. But
Wags, is it safe to say, as we kind of talk about this, I think that, every year teams go in and they go, oh man, I hope our guys don't get claimed, but every team's saying that. And I think that, at the end of the day, like very rarely, do guys really get swept up and go to another team's 53? It happens. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It happens, but it's not like, oh man, there's, we're going to lose 10 of our guys right now. It just doesn't really happen that way because all these other teams have guys that they've evaluated all camp long that they think might be able to contribute for them, that kind of understand the program, understand the playbook, and they're going to be using their resources to keep them on the practice squad. So some of these guys are certainly a risk, and we might lose a couple of them, but it's not going to be like a wholesale everybody's gone that has been cut today. A number of these guys are coming back to the practice.
Yeah, and it's not like there's not other running backs that aren't in the same position around the league. Right. I know we get a little bit of an attachment to a few of these guys because we're following them closely. Right. Heck, we had Patrick Taylor on the podcast. That happens. I'm not going to pretend that that's not part of it. But heck, even Dexter Williams, who the Packers apparently just have on speed dial, looked pretty good in camp. So,
just hanging out.
Yeah, I think they can bring some other people in if they need to. So the only surprise here really for me is not the way that the Packers did this. It's just that because we talked about other position groups that they might do this at. Defensive line, cornerback, where they're really stacked with talent. They chose to do it at running back. So they're, obviously they've got a couple of headliners at the top. They're rolling with it. And I think this will work out fine for the Packers. And they clearly felt comfortable moving forward with just Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon at the running back spot. I already mentioned that enabled one extra position on the offensive line. So was it Sean Ryan? Was it Rasheed Walker? Both of those guys were draft picks, and they were able to keep all 11 of their draft picks. So 10 offensive linemen, one more than they've kept the last few years. But does that have anything to do with David Bakhtiari, Elgton Jenkins' status? Is my gut feeling wrong about that? And that's part of the reason they kept an extra offensive lineman. Do they, to your point, just feel like both of those guys deserved a spot on this roster and they needed to do everything they could for them not to get snapped up by another team around the league? But either way, sometimes there's benefits to creating that extra roster flexibility and opening up another spot in another position group.
Yeah, and I love this. John Dorn, what's up, John? Thanks for listening. He mentioned Amari Rodgers could be used as a running back. He also, had mentioned the cut of Winfrey as being a bit of a surprise. I'm a little surprised that Juwann Winfrey was cut at wide receiver, but Wags, you talked just a bit ago about, when the Packers are keeping guys who are the most likely to potentially get claimed. I mean, would you put somebody like Samori Toure, who looked really good and popped, especially in that last game, but looked good all camp long, is he in that category maybe as somebody that the Packers want to keep over somebody like Juwann Winfrey, who's been in the league for a few years and maybe might be a little bit more of a system, guy that Rodgers likes, but, less likely to maybe get claimed. I don't know, but it seems like he might be a prime candidate to be one of those guys.
Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Juwan Winfrey gets claimed.
No.
We'll see. Maybe I will be wrong on that.
Denver could take him back, to be honest.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, I know we talked about that a couple of weeks ago. But he's not going to be someone that anybody's looking at as like, quite honestly, a high potential prospect right now. And I think that's what it came down to. That's what probably gave Toure the edge. He popped a little bit more, showed a little of explosiveness that, quite honestly, the Packers might need this season. I don't know how many reps Toure is going to get out there week one. I probably don't expect him to get a whole bunch, but they might need him. I think we've been saying now we're not totally settled with this wide receiver group, and that's why I had been advocating for 7 from the beginning. We've got guys in Watkins and Randall Cobb that maybe are not having the best injury history at this stage in their career. Hope they can stay healthy this whole season. They're clearly at the top of the depth chart right now. But we've also got some rookies, Toure being one of them. Obviously, Dobbs and Christian Watson, we didn't get to see anything of the whole preseason. Amari Rodgers, who you mentioned could take some reps at running back. I would really like Amari Rodgers to be a consistent bet at receiver, but point noted. That said, we've got a whole bunch of guys with potential, but as Aaron Rodgers said, production matters over potential at the end of the day. And so I think keeping an extra guy that showed the ability to make some plays throughout the course of this camp and preseason in Toure makes a lot of sense, and hopefully he can continue to develop, and at some point we may need him to contribute. So yeah, a little bit of surprise that it was Winfrey getting cut just because Rodgers advocated for him so strongly, but I think at the end of the day it was about making the decision for who projects to have the longest term impact and potential, both this season and beyond. And that's why they decided to go with Toure. So congratulations to that young man.
Awesome.
I know that certainly he has been putting in all the right work, and hopefully it works out for both parties.
Wags, I love our chat tonight. David Henderson says, you guys know the Vikings will claim Winfrey because they take most of the ex-Packers. I just like that's hilarious and accurate. So looking ahead, I mean, were there no surprise really on the offensive line, right? Caleb Jones, I think, getting cut. He's huge, right? He's a big offensive tackle. He's somebody that could definitely be a prime practice squad guy. But I think the biggest surprise maybe to me, and I think I'm more surprised than you were, was the Jonathan Ford, the Packers rookie defensive tackle, making the team over Jack Heflin and Chris Slayton. Or Chris Slayton. I thought both of those guys in the games that we saw popped. We talked offline. I want you to kind of explain your thoughts on the Jonathan Ford situation because, good for Jonathan, but I'm just surprised. I thought Jack Heflin locked the roster spot after the last preseason game, and I was mistaken.
Yeah, I mean, but that said, Jonathan Ford had a good camp. So there was a lot of reports, particularly practice reports from Packer beat writers talking about Jonathan Ford having some good practices, having some good reps, blowing some things up. So am I surprised he made it over Chris Slayton and Jack Heflin? Based on what we saw, maybe a little bit. Yeah, I can agree with you. But that being said, this could be a classic case of what I said just a little bit ago of they're evaluating all the reps, not just the preseason game reps. And so it's not a surprise to me that he was right there. I think from what we saw and what we knew, we would have probably given the edge to Heflin and Slayton. But he was right there with those two. Don't get me wrong. So this may not have been a very easy decision. I'm sure it was a hard decision to make between those three guys. But ultimately, they must have felt comfortable based on the totality of those evaluations that Ford was the guy that had earned the roster spot and has the longest term potential to help this team. So the fact of the matter is we kept 6 defensive linemen, and that is a position group that hasn't really been a strength from top to bottom for several years. It's been Kenny Clark. Dean Lowry's been pretty solid, but it's been up and down at times. I think it's a fair assessment. And no disrespect to someone like a Tyler Lancaster, but it's kind of tough when someone of that skill set and talent is getting major reps every week. It's been quite a development, I think, and the amount of talent that they've invested in this defensive line. So it was going to be tough sledding, quite honestly, for Heflin and Slayton to make this 53-man roster from the start. We had Heflin on for our podcast this offseason. I think he was going in, certainly didn't expect to make the team just because he was on the team last year. He knew he was going to put in the work. He did. I think that's the thing that really sucks is it appears he did everything.
He did everything
he could and everything right. And it still just wasn't quite enough. So I think that's one of the painful parts of talking about this. And I'm sure he's got to be wondering what else could have I done? But really, I don't think there was much else he could have done. This was a stacked group and it was a heated competition. So I expect that both Slayton and Heflin, those are two guys I wouldn't be surprised get picked up by another team and end up on another team 53-man roster as well.
I think the Packers are lucky to get one of those two guys back. But to your point, and if we're able to get Jack back in particular, count our lucky stars, and he probably ends up on the roster at some point pretty quick as the season progresses. That's just the reality of it. No surprises for me. The inside linebacker group, outside linebacker, nothing really either. I thought that that was a battle behind Preston Smith and Rashawn Gary. I had thought internally, I thought Ladarius Hamilton and Kobe Jones had both balled out. And I thought one of those two in particular could make the team, but I wouldn't be surprised if both of those guys are in the practice squad.
Yeah, I hope they do. I really hope they do.
I like them both. They're good.
It's another spot where I have to think things were razor close. I had Tipa Nalei and Jonathan Garvin making the team only because they've been ahead on the depth chart and really hadn't moved off of that spot. Both give Kobe Jones and Ladarius Hamilton a ton of credit, though, because they were getting a lot of noise. They were creating a lot of noise all throughout camp. And so I think they certainly also have to be sitting there saying, man, what else could I do? But fierce competition. And, I hope that they stick around because those are certainly a position group where I wouldn't be surprised to see elevations and potentially you may need one or both of those guys to contribute at some point this season as well.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think maybe the biggest surprise wasn't the cut so much as the injury, though, and this is at safety. And I saw that it's a question that came in from David Henderson about the safety position. I didn't know Sean Davis was hurt, so I was really surprised to see that he got cut with the injury designation here. That my jaw kind of dropped this morning when I saw that one happened because I thought he had a phenomenal camp. I had him pretty much put in pen as the third safety for the Packers going into this. And now all of a sudden the Packers go and they carry 5 safeties going into the season with Savage and Amos. And then Abernathy, just a dark horse candidate, right? Comes from the USFL. Awesome story. Guy's able to make some splash plays in the preseason and he sticks on the roster. Tariq Carpenter and Dallin Levitt, from a former Oakland Raider. So the Packers now were 5 deep at the safety position. What's your readout of this group right now, Wags? Because I think this could still be a group where there's some movement potentially to come here, especially with the 5 deep at the safety group. Yeah, I was expecting 4 candidates.
There's been a lot of action, and this is probably the one group where what we've been seeing has been not necessarily competition in a good way, not because of underperformance. I don't want to misread that, but because of injury and just having to rotate so many guys in there. Heck, Abernathy only got signed because of injuries to Levitt and to Darnell Savage and to Innis Gaines and on down Vernon Scott and on down the line. And honestly, you look at Sean Davis and Vernon and Scott, started camp as the primary backups at safety. You're thinking those two guys have the inside track. Ennis Gaines was on the the practice squad all last season. You think he has an outside shot as probably the fifth safety. And then all of a sudden they make a late signing of Levitt. We've got all kinds of injuries. Tariq Carpenter and Levitt, I think by all accounts, really showed they're very sound tacklers. I think they really like both of those guys to be special teams contributors, and they're trying to update that. And Abernathy, I want to be cautious as I say this, but it sounds like they think they might have actually found a guy. So I'm super excited by that because he made some impact plays, but it's like, okay, was that alone going to be enough? Clearly they like what they saw in him in practice as well. And what would it be as a development, Dane, if all of a sudden, Micah Abernathy comes along kind of like Rasul Douglas, and he's able to make an impact. Now he's not going to be starting, but he might, be forcing his way onto the field, whether in special teams or in certain packages, or if Darnell Savage is not fully healthy, whatever the case might be. I'm choosing to take this as a wildly optimistic sign for how they decided to move forward with this position group.
Wags, it's just so this is the NFL to a T. If you'd have told me 30 days ago that the Packers keep 5 safeties and Sean Davis, Vernon Scott, and Ennis Gaines, none of those guys make the team out of the 5, I'd be like, you don't know what you're talking about. So it's just remarkable how quickly fortunes can change in this league.
Yeah, and quite honestly, if none of those injuries happen, they might all be on the team.
They're the
tonight.
5.
So that's just the unfortunate thing that sucks. Like for all of those guys, Savage doesn't get hurt. Abernathy never gets signed. And Levitt, I think, probably contributed to that too because he signed after both of those injuries. So he was supposed to just be a camp body. Let's be honest. And now he makes the 53-man roster a few weeks later. So, good for that young man. That's quite a story. But you also, at the same time, can feel a little bit of empathy for some of those other guys that certainly I don't think expected to make the 53-man roster, but had to feel like they had an inside track when preseason began. And all of a sudden now they're on the street looking for a job, unfortunately. That's just the cruelty of the NFL as a business.
Yeah, it is. But we talk about the guys that are unexpected, right? You mentioned Abernathy. Perhaps the other guy who gives him a run for his money is Jack Coco at long snapper for the Packers. You mentioned Mason Crosby. I'm thinking about our old guys on this roster. Mason Crosby coming back from the PUP list, and of course Pat O'Donnell a lock at punter, but Jack Coco, the Packers have rotated musical chairs at long snapper, and y'all listening might be going, why are you talking about long snapper? Because special teams has been a problem the last few years, and Jack Coco has been able to come in here, wins a job from Steve Wordle, and by all appearances has stuck on the initial 53. He's going to have the light shine bright on him because now he's competing against every other long snapper that's not on a roster. But for the time being, he is the long snapper for the Green Bay Packers. He showed a lot of consistency day to day. It sounds like he's improving every single day here. So I think the Packers may have finally found their long-term long snapper in Jack Coco, and good for him. He's a good dude putting in the work, and we're going to need this special teams to get better. Point blank. So we need some stability in this position and as a whole with our kicker, punter, and our long snapper.
Yeah, and another guy, Jack, that came on our podcast this offseason. So if you didn't hear that interview, go back in the archives and check it out. But that's his plan. Another guy, he had a plan, and he said, listen, I'm paraphrasing here. It's not just about trying to make the 53-man roster this season. That's step one. He wants to be the long snapper for the next 10 years.
Yes.
And quite honestly, if he's able to stick and make it through this season and play well, that might be something that has an opportunity to come to fruition. Not that I can get a crystal ball and predict 10 years into the future. No one can. But once you've established yourself, I think at that position and perform well, perform consistently, you've got a track record. That job is not an easy one to supplant. So it's a big deal for Jack Coco. So very
Awesome.
happy for him,
Congrats,
and
Jack.
I hope for his sake that he will continue to get the opportunities to be the long snapper here for Packers moving forward.
Wags, what are we looking at now? A timeline. What do you think? The next few days, the Packers play in less than 2 weeks in Minnesota, but I think they're going to be active here, churning the roster. They're going to start adding practice squad really soon here, I think, and then we might even see some active 53-man roster guys. I think that there's without naming names, there could be another 3 guys on this roster, 4 guys that maybe ending up on the practice squad as the Packers go somewhere else and add to try to get the best 53 they can find.
Yeah, and I mean, it's going to be a continual process. It's not just before week 1. After week 1 and all throughout the season, they're going to be making moves, adding, cutting guys from the 53. That's just kind of the way that this goes. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they have a couple of guys that they end up signing that get cut around the league to the 53-man. I wouldn't be shocked either if we assume that they're going to keep guys that were on the roster previously re-signed to the practice squad. But I really wouldn't be surprised if they go out and try to get 3-4 guys that were on rosters around the league to fill out the practice squad as well, just to be bringing in a few different looks and get some additional evaluations. So yeah, they're going to be active. And, I think earlier in chat, someone said to bring back Etling. And yeah, he's got the inside track, but Tim Boyle got cut from Detroit today. So maybe Packers try to bring Tim back. He's very familiar, certainly with the system. Not that you expect the practice squad quarterback to have to make contributions, but, they're only 2 snaps away. So, it's not like we're going to be a good position if we end up there. I get it. But I certainly think you're right, Dan. There's going to be quite a bit of activity. So I'll be curious to see how that all shapes out tomorrow, first of all. And because I think we'll see it maybe 1 or 2 53-man roster changes as soon as tomorrow or Thursday.
Yeah. So, Wags, anything else that you want to mention as we wrap this podcast up? It was an extremely busy day in Green Bay and across the NFL.
No, man. I'm looking forward to getting into regular season football.
Me too.
We haven't gotten to see most of these starters out there, aside from some of the younger guys. So I'm anxious to see how this team looks and is how ready they are going into week 1. It's 1 game. So week 1 doesn't matter that much in the grand scheme of things. But I'll tell you what, I think the Vikings, they're going to want to be sending a signal, right? The Packers have been living atop this division for the last few seasons. And I'm sure that with the new coach in Minnesota, they're going to want to come out and make a statement. So we better be ready to go week 1. And after our debacle in New Orleans last year, or I guess Jacksonville playing New Orleans, but nonetheless, hopefully we've got the right mindset and we're mentally and physically prepared. And we'll have more time to do a preview of that game next week. But I'm just going to be really anxious to see how everything comes together and how healthy we really are, particularly at the tackle position. And if Elton Jenkins and David Bakhtiari are going to be ready to go.
That's right. And folks, we've got new followers, new listeners every day here. And we will be back next week with, as Wag said, with a preview podcast. We like to preview each game. We like to identify who we think our players, X factors are going to be each week. And then we, of course, do a recap podcast after games. But, we're getting back into football season, so looking forward to it. You're always welcome to join, jump on, drop your questions, your comments in the chat. We're reading all of them. We sure appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for listening tonight.
Yep. As always, be legendary and go Pack, go.
Go Pack, go.
Every year I know we gonna go hard. We been that team ever since Bart started. All my cheese heads go pack go. Ain't showing no mercy, cutting no slack, no. I ain't a bad sport and I'll even wish you good luck. Only thing I will